Is Pakistan able to counter India's move in Kashmir? Islamabad has taken several actions since New Delhi scrapped the autonomy of this contested area. It says war is not an option. But can an armed conflict be averted? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Mohamed Jamjoom. Kashmir has long been a flashpoint between India and Pakistan. And by revoking the Indian-administered region's autonomy, India has just made things worse. Although Islamabad says not to the point of it considering military action for now. Pakistan's government is looking to challenge Kashmir's disputed status politically and legally. It's downgraded diplomatic ties with New Delhi, suspended trade, and shut down a major train service to its neighbor. India has urged Pakistan to review what it's doing in retaliation to what it says is an internal affair. Kamal Haider reports from Islamabad.
A war of words and tit for tat in what appears to be a quid pro quo. The Pakistani foreign minister now shooting down India's reservations about Pakistan's downgrading of diplomatic relations, saying that this was the unilateral action by India which led to the Pakistani move. He also said that he feared another false flag operation like Pulwama, which brought the two countries to the brink of conflict, and said that Pakistan was deeply concerned about the plight of over 12 million Kashmiris, voicing his fears that after the curfew is lifted, that it could lead to a catastrophic situation. The Pakistani foreign minister also saying that talks on the Afghan peace process would continue unaffected, and also said that the corridor Pakistan was planning to open for the Sikh pilgrims at Kartarpur would also remain, and that Pakistan would not back down from that because Pakistan respected the religious minorities. Also the fact that Pakistan was now saying that it was going to take this issue to the United Nations Security Council. Kamal Haider for Inside Story.
Indian-administered Kashmir has been on lockdown since the Indian government decided to strip the region of its special constitutional status. Telecommunications and the internet have also been cut off. Priyanka Gupta reports from New Delhi.
Srinagar, a ghost town. Troops on every corner. Barricades everywhere in the largest city in the Indian-administered Kashmir. India's government says recent troop reinforcements are to ensure security and to maintain order as Kashmiris see the effects of the significant changes to their autonomy and statehood.
They didn't tell us anything and revoked Article 370. All the phone lines are down. Trains are not working. We haven't seen anything like this in Kashmir in our lives.
Migrant workers who hope to find employment here have been stranded for days.
Internet is down. We can't access cash machines. No one is listening to our plight. No one cares about us laborers.
In New Delhi, this prominent Kashmiri filmmaker is worried about his elderly parents in Srinagar. He questions the timing of the government's decision to revoke the state's autonomy and divide it into two federally administered territories.
The one thing about the timing of this decision is that it seems awfully timed, and so then one is forced to wonder as to why this would have happened. And crudely, yes, the Kashmir story has pushed the impending economic crisis off the front pages for this week, and who knows, until the next round of elections.
Legal challenges are already being planned. The first public interest litigation against the government's decision has been filed, and there are more expected. Some constitutional experts say that there are some legal loopholes that the judges may consider.
The process is a certain amount of constitutional skullduggery, which I expect the Supreme Court or any other constitutional court to look at very closely. Constitutions do not work on the whim of a few people alone, no matter how high they are in the constitutional structure.
India's government, led by the Bharatiya Janata Party of Hindu nationalists, say Kashmir special status was discriminatory. And with a change of status, it will be open to investment and more jobs. For now, these shops in Srinagar are closed, and no one knows for how long. Priyanka Gupta, Al Jazeera, New Delhi.
Let's bring in our guest. Sreeram Chaulia is professor and dean at the Jindal School of International Affairs and joins us from New Delhi. Victoria Schofield is an independent South Asia analyst, and she joins us from London. Tariq Pirzada is a Pakistan security analyst, and he joins us from Islamabad. Welcome to all of our guests. Tariq, let me start with you. These moves that Pakistan is making, suspending train service to India, threatening to close airspace to India, downgrading diplomatic ties with India, what kind of effect will it have in the long run?
Well, let me start with the initial effect of that. The purpose of severing, or downgrading the diplomatic ties is, A, to send a message to the world that the tensions between India and Pakistan over Kashmir, because of the actions taken by Modi to simply strip the people of Kashmir of their right to govern themselves and all other liberties, that has now reached a point that if we don't take an action now, the situation will will move towards a direct military confrontation. So this downgrading of diplomatic ties actually sends a clear message of what I just mentioned. It tells the world that tensions are very high, that the normal ties have become strained, that the diplomatic ties are no longer viable, cannot be maintained as such, and the two nations are headed in the direction of a military conflict. That's the purpose of sending this and various other actions that Pakistan has taken, and the message is, I believe, very clear that they have sent to the whole world.
Sreeram Chaulia, you heard just now what Tariq Pirzada said. Do you believe, as he stated, that India and Pakistan are headed down a path of confrontation?
A lot depends on how Pakistan behaves itself. If it overreacts, we are being very cool in India. In fact, our Prime Minister said we have to adopt a statesman-like position. It's an internal matter. And we are not interested in escalating this conflict. This is an administrative reorganization of Kashmir that was always a part of India since the 7 decades ago. So for Pakistan to meddle and interfere and to try and internationalize this, that is their strategy, because they cannot match India conventionally. So they want to bring in third parties, fourth parties, crying about alleged human rights violations and such things. But the reality is that these measures are not like pinpricks. And frankly, cancellation of trade with India, the volume is like hardly $2 billion. Most of our trade is not with Pakistan at all. And it's not going to affect us. And nor is it going to compel us to change. But I suspect the real problem is not what they're publicly announcing. The real problem is they're going to unleash the same old jihadist poison that has destabilized Kashmir for many decades. They have terrorist masterminds who have not been brought to book. Imran Khan, the Prime Minister of Pakistan, publicly admitted in his recent US trip that we have 30,000 to 40,000 armed actors who need to be reined in. That's his estimate. And if a government is saying it, that's conservative. So we are talking about, a large-scale jihadist menace that is looming across the border, and India is preparing for it, So trade ties and cutting off, cultural links is a bad idea. We don't want to take this forward. But if they decide to go more aggressive and use force, I think we are prepared with counter force. We have the deterrent measures at the border, and that's why we have deployed forces in advance of this move to prevent any kind of mischief or adventurism by Pakistan.
Victoria Schofield, Indian lawyers are split about the constitutionality of revoking Article 370. Many have said the government's plan is likely to face court challenges. What do you think? Is this something that's going to be heard by the Supreme Court in India? Could it possibly be reversed in the courts?
Well, I think it's early days yet to say exactly what can happen in the courts. I think undoubtedly there is a section of the population in India who are surprised at the way Prime Minister Modi has really unilaterally altered the constitution As we know, the move to abrogate Article 370 has been part of the BJP manifesto for a long time, but the idea always was that there should be some consultation with the Legislative Assembly. Well, the fact that the state of Jammu and Kashmir has been under President's rule for the past year, and that has just been renewed, really took away the opportunity for this consultation. And so I think it's a very drastic move without consulting the people. There is bound to be some reaction within the valley. The curfew has not yet been lifted, but when you've already got a section of the population alienated, to put them in lockdown, to really not have any consultation at all, to bring in extra troops, is bound to have a reaction within the valley, let alone what Pakistan's position is.
Sreeram Chaulia, there's many critics of Prime Minister Narendra Modi who say that revoking the special status of Indian-administered Kashmir is not just an attack on India's secular identity, but it's also part of a broader agenda of the Prime Minister to make India more of a Hindu nation and also to make it more authoritarian. What do you say to that criticism?
Not at all. You know, it's a very democratic decision. It was endorsed by a massive majority of both houses of India's elected representatives, our parliament, and through executive order by the President of the Republic. And so, and it's this kind of change is provided for within the Constitution itself. So in no ways is it undemocratic. And secondly, the critics of Modi, you know, a lot of them are in a minority. I mean, they are basically people who believed in the idea of ghettoization of Kashmir, you know, where 97% of the people of Kashmir Valley are Muslims. And it's been deliberately kept so by preventing people from the rest of India from visiting and acquiring property and residing there through the so-called special status. So it was maintained as a ghetto, which in turn festered the alienation that Victoria is talking about. The alienation is not inbuilt or natural. It's instigated by Pakistan, one. And two, we were hacking at our own feet by having Article 370. So Modi has now removed it. You know, it's a proactive step to fully integrate and assimilate Kashmir into the national mainstream. And that will eventually happen. I don't believe these theories that, you know, that this is a Hindu agenda and all that. You know, this is the typical international liberal talk, and a few leftists in our country who wear those things on their sleeves. But look at the emotional outpouring across India. You know, it's not just parliament, the public in general has been, you know, tears have welled up in people's eyes saying, finally, we did it. You know, we had to do this to end the problem once and for all. And I think that's going to happen eventually. We must have coexistence of Hindus and Muslims and Sikhs and other communities. Why should it be a ghetto like this, which is then becomes a fodder for use by our vicious neighbor? So it's very important that, you know, we consolidate by creating the idea. In fact, you mentioned a secular state. I'll tell you, our notion of secularism is coexistence of all faiths, not exclusive domains and enclaves like what they created in Kashmir Valley for so long. So eventually, we will want to integrate it, and that's what's going to happen. And that's why Pakistan is so scared, and that's why they are overreacting and talking about war and Imran Khan. You know, the Pakistani politicians are even saying India may have another Pulwama attack. This is a reference to a major suicide bombing.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
This is the problem.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I see Tariq Pirzada who wants to respond to what you're saying. And Tariq Pirzada, I also want to ask you, I'm going to let you respond because I saw you wanting to jump in there, but also what do people in Pakistan think? Do they believe that Prime Minister Modi is attempting to make India into a more Hindu nation?
It's the dominance of Hinduism, the imposition of Hindu ideology, the Indianization of the Indian Republic to the exclusion of all minorities, including 200 million Muslims. This is their fundamental agenda. It was a part of their manifesto. There is nothing to hide about it, and your question was so valid. Number two, let me come back to the UN resolutions. This whole talk that this is an internal issue, somebody has to read the 1948, 49, and several other resolutions of the United Nations that says that because there's a special that the Kashmiri Muslims of India have to be given the right to decide their fate as an independent people through the exercise of what is called the right to plebiscite. This is a specific language of the UN resolutions, and this is why Pakistan is now headed to United Nations, and this is what they intend to say, if I can understand the government of Pakistan, they will be saying that we are hereby informing the world community that India has assimilated, gobbled up the state of India by their local laws now, while their earlier occupation was not was also a terrible thing. So if you do not enforce your own resolutions as you passed in 1948-49 and as were endorsed by the Prime Minister Nehru of India several years ago, if you don't do that, the situation in subcontinent will naturally be pushed in the direction of a military conflict. And this is, I assure you, the people of Pakistan are in an absolute have the determination to support the independence movement that is going on. And if that does not succeed, there will be a direct military conflict. And this whole theory that Pakistan cannot compete with India conventionally, we just shot down, if I may say, the Indian Air Force. If it ever came to a direct conflict, this is not East Pakistan, this is not 1971, will destroy India. I
Tariq
think this is what the people of Pakistan think.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I want to, Sreeram Chaulia, let me just get to you in just 1 minute. I want to ask Victoria Schofield one question now. Victoria Schofield, if Prime Minister Modi succeeds in this strategy with regard to Kashmir, do you believe that he would move on to issues that are even more religiously polarizing or more polarizing in society?
Well, what he said he's going to move on to is to try and get back the rest of the state, which is under Pakistan administration. And I think that would be highly contentious. So by that we mean Gilgit-Baltistan and the area which the Indians called Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, which the Pakistanis called Azad Jammu and Kashmir. And so when we're talking about internal affairs, the fact is that this is also part of the manifesto, that the whole state, as it once was a former princely state, should be incorporated back into India. This is very contentious, and I don't think we can overlook that. And I would like to make one point. I was in the valley in the summer, and I would not call it a ghetto. I don't think that's the right description of the valley. The people there are Kashmiris. They enjoy living the way they live. And what they would like to do is live without a military presence, a large military presence, and go about their daily lives and enjoy the beautiful valley. So I think one really has to cool the tempers and not get involved in the rhetoric. And what really needs to be done is how this issue can be sorted out for the benefit of the people who live there, which is why I would not say it was a democratic decision. It may have been supported by people in India, but it should have been supported by the people who live in the valley and in the region.
Sreeram Chaulia, yes, I see you wanting to jump in. Please go ahead. And could you also respond to what Victoria Schofield said about this being undemocratic in nature, this revocation of Article 370?
Well, first of all, I'll say that I have visited Kashmir Valley several times myself, and there is a large segment of Kashmiri elites who have strong separatist and secessionist tendencies and who sympathize with Pakistan. And they believe in the two-nation theory which divided India and Pakistan, which is that Muslims should have their own homeland and should not be part of India. But it's a complete bunkum to say that Modi has some kind of a, Hindu rightist agenda and is trying to, convert the whole country into a kind of a Hindu right paradise. I think it's completely wrong because, there are nearly 180 million Muslims in India. There are 180 million Muslims in India, and out of whom only 7 million are Kashmiris. Why are only these 7 million seeking secession or independence, or not all of them, but many of them, especially the elites? It's because it's part of their divide strategy and rule strategy. They have failed in terms of governance. Now, coming to the point about ghettos, I will say that
my friend, you need to read the 1948-49 resolutions of the UN Security Council.
And through the autonomy, no, you are going back and back. In 1948 to 49, you are the one supposed to vacate Kashmir first with your
read the resolutions, my friend.
And you have
gentlemen,
not
we want to have a discussion here.
If I could, then you talk about resolutions, okay? You are harping on about old stuff. We have moved on. And the last point I want to make is, you are saying that it could become a flashpoint and go to war. Let me tell you something. Your economy is in complete doldrums. You've just been bailed out by the IMF. You're under tremendous pressure by the Americans.
Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
You think you'll go to the Security Council and get relief from this matter? I don't see that happening.
Sreeram Chaulia,
You cannot
and Tariq
raise even a
Pirzada,
resolution here.
please let me interject here.
On this matter, because it's an internal thing. India
Let
is a
me
great
move
power,
on
it's
here,
a rising
please.
power,
We are
and
starting
don't
to
even try
run out of
compare yourselves
time.
here. Please don't get into this equivalence
Mr.
battle.
Chaulia,
That's been the problem.
Mr. Chaulia.
Look at your own internal state and focus on it instead of continuously pointing fingers at us.
Okay. Tariq Pirzada, now, if you could also respond, I know you want to jump in, but if you could please keep your remarks as brief as possible because we are starting to run out of time. You keep mentioning the fact that it seems that the countries are on path to war. Now, I want to ask you, can Pakistan, being in the situation that it's in right now, even afford to go to war with India?
It has nothing to do with the economy. It has to do with the determination and the planning. And the issue is one of national security interest of Pakistan. Indian-occupied Kashmir constitutes a part of the ideology under which Pakistan was created.
Mr. Chaulia, please let Mr. Pirzada make his point.
Pakistan are inseparable. That's why you are ready for war. Look after your welfare needs. Look after the crying people of Balochistan.
Don't worry about it. Don't give us a lecture.
Festering wounds
Mr. Chaulia and Mr. Pirzada.
Before casting stones at India. You cannot match us. You're living in a fool's paradise.
We will destroy you.
Gentlemen, I'm going to give the last point here to Victoria Schofield. Victoria Schofield, Mr. Chaulia, could you please let me ask my last question to Victoria Schofield? The arguing between you and Mr. Pirzada has eaten up a lot of time, so I want to give her the last point here. Now, Victoria Schofield, how much latitude does Pakistan have right now when it comes to Kashmir?
By latitude, I'm not quite sure what you mean.
I mean, with the steps that they are taking, how much of an effect can they have when it comes to the moves that India has made in revoking Article 370? Will any of the rhetoric that they are engaging in change the situation?
I think the rhetoric won't change the situation. I would firmly say, and we've had the example of the two guests from India and Pakistan arguing, and so nobody's been able to hear what they've been saying, is that they have to cool it and have dialogue, because this situation has been going on for decades, and they don't suffer, the people who live in the region suffer. And my last word would be, they have to really think about having a proper dialogue, which has been lacking for decades.
On live and let live.
I agree with Victoria.
And let live. That's our principle.
I agree with Victoria. I endorse her view.
Live and let live.
Sreeram Chaulia, let me ask you this, because you have been interjecting a lot the last few minutes. There have been many calls by international bodies and many countries calling for a de-escalation of tensions. Right now, what I'm seeing is a very heated debate between you and Tariq Pirzada. Will we get to a point where the two countries can actually speak?
Mohamed, the one escalating it is Pakistan. We are playing it cool. Stop bothering us. We are playing it cool. We are not interested in escalating this at all. The nation is in a joyous mood because
Tariq Pirzada, then let me ask Tariq Pirzada,
integrate Kashmir.
Will we get to a point where the two countries can sit down and talk in this atmosphere? And we have less than a minute.
India has simply gobbled up the whole state. Yeah. India has gobbled up the whole state. Why would it want to sit down with Pakistan and decide the fate of Jammu and Kashmir?
We welcome
this is why we are headed to United Nations.
Okay?
And if we don't get
Kashmir, you're never going to get.
Only on Kashmir.
You are not going to get any justice.
Gentlemen,
justice. First, do justice to your own people.
Gentlemen,
do justice to your own people's needs.
Gentlemen, we have run out of time. Thank you to all our guests, Sreeram Chaulia, Victoria Schofield, and Tariq Pirzada. And thank you, too, for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Mohamed Jamjoom, and the whole team here, bye for now.